I'm Nicole Rodriguez, and at 52, I thought my life had settled into predictable patterns. Environmental law kept me busy enough to forget about the loneliness that crept in during quiet moments. That Tuesday night in December, I was working late again on the Riverside development case when the fire alarm shattered my concentration. The piercing sound sent everyone into immediate panic mode. I grabbed my briefcase and headed for the stairwell, but the hallways were already filling with acrid smoke. My eyes watered, making it impossible to see clearly. The emergency lighting cast everything in an eerie red glow. "This way, stay low," a voice called out behind me. I felt a hand on my shoulder, guiding me toward what I hoped was the right direction. The woman helping me was younger, maybe early 30s, with blonde hair catching the dim light. "Can you make it down the stairs?" she asked, her blue eyes focused and calm despite the chaos. "I think so." My throat felt raw from the smoke, but her presence somehow steadied my nerves. We descended together, her hand occasionally touching my back when I stumbled. The coffee shop on the third floor was completely dark, explaining why she'd been in the building so late. She must have been a regular there, working on something important enough to keep her past business hours. "I'm Paige," she said as we reached the second floor landing. "Nicole," I managed between coughs. The ground floor offered blessed relief from the smoke. Emergency vehicles were already arriving, their lights painting the snowy street in alternating red and blue. We stood among the other evacuees, watching firefighters rush past us. "Coffee?" Paige produced 2 cups from somewhere, steam rising in the cold air. I grabbed these on our way out. I accepted gratefully, wrapping my fingers around the warmth. She had this energy about her, creative and slightly chaotic, completely different from my ordered world of legal briefs and court appearances. "Environmental lawyer," I answered her unspoken question, gesturing toward my briefcase. "Writer," she replied simply. I was researching late-night coffee shop atmosphere for a scene. Didn't expect it to become this dramatic. Her laugh was infectious, making light of our shared predicament. We talked until the all-clear was given, about her writing projects and my current cases. She listened with genuine interest when I explained the complexities of environmental litigation. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked as we walked toward the parking garage. "What do you mean?" "The coffee shop. I'm there most evenings." Something in her tone made me look at her more carefully. There was an invitation there, subtle but unmistakable. At my age, I should have recognized the signs, but it had been so long since anyone had shown that kind of interest. "Maybe," I said, though we both knew I'd be there. The next evening, I found myself ordering coffee I didn't really need, scanning the small cafe until I spotted her blonde head bent over a laptop. She looked up when I approached, that same warm smile spreading across her face. "Nicole, I was hoping you'd come." We fell into conversation easily, picking up where we'd left off the night before. She talked about her writing with passion, describing characters and plots with animated gestures. I found myself sharing more than I usually did with anyone, including details about particularly challenging cases. "You really care about this stuff," she observed, watching me explain a groundwater contamination lawsuit. "Someone has to. That's what makes you interesting." The comment caught me off guard. Interesting wasn't a word people typically use to describe environmental lawyers. We were usually seen as necessary but tedious. Over the following weeks, our coffee meetings became routine. Paige would be there most evenings when I stopped by, and gradually I started staying longer. Her writing schedule seemed flexible enough to accommodate these conversations, though I suspected she was adjusting her routine to match mine. "Tell me about this character you're working on," I said one evening, noticing how she kept glancing at her screen. She hesitated, color rising in her cheeks. "It's a short story about 2 women who meet during an emergency evacuation." My coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. "Really?" "Fiction, of course." But her eyes held mine longer than necessary. The story she eventually shared was beautifully written, capturing details from our first meeting with startling accuracy. The fictional women were different enough to maintain plausible deniability, but the emotional undertones were unmistakable. One character was older, established in her career but isolated. The other was younger, creative, drawn to the older woman's quiet strength. "It's good," I said finally, meaning it. "You don't mind being inspiration?" "Should I?" Walking to our cars that night, we moved more slowly than usual. The parking lot was nearly empty, streetlights casting long shadows on the snow. When we reached her car first, she turned to face me. "Nicole," Yes? Instead of words, she stepped closer and kissed me. Soft, tentative, giving me every opportunity to pull away. I didn't. For a moment that felt like eternity, I kissed her back, tasting coffee and possibility. When we separated, she searched my face uncertainly. I should go, I said, though I didn't move. Should you? The question hung between us in the cold air, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to examine. Finally, I did step back, murmuring goodnight and walking quickly to my car. But I knew I'd be back tomorrow. That kiss haunted everything I did the next day. During depositions, I caught myself tracing my lips with my fingertips, remembering the softness of hers. The Riverside development case needed my full attention, but my mind kept wandering to coffee shops and blonde writers who saw me as interesting. I told myself I wouldn't go back. At 52, I had no business getting involved with someone 13 years younger, especially someone who clearly wanted more than professional conversation. But when 6 o'clock came around, I found myself walking toward the familiar cafe, briefcase in hand and a convenient excuse about needing caffeine. You came, Paige said, looking up from her laptop with undisguised relief. I needed coffee. Of course. Her smile suggested she knew better. This time I chose the table, something near the window where I could watch the evening foot traffic, maintaining the illusion that this was casual, professional. She closed her laptop and joined me, carrying 2 cups. I got your usual, dark roast, no sugar. The fact that she'd memorized my coffee orders should have alarmed me. Instead, it sent warmth spreading through my chest in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine. Working on anything new? I asked, trying to steer us towards safer territory. Always. She leaned forward, elbows on the table. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. About that story. What about it? The older woman. What do you think she was afraid of? The question was clearly about more than fiction. I sipped my coffee, considering how much honesty the moment could handle. Maybe she thought she was too old to start something new. But what if the younger woman didn't care about age? The younger woman might not understand what she's getting into. Paige tilted her head, studying me with those impossibly blue eyes. What if she's smarter than the older woman gives her credit for? We were dancing around the real conversation, using her fictional characters as shields. But the intent was clear enough. She wasn't backing down from what had happened in the parking lot. Tell me about your writing, I said, changing direction. How long have you been doing it professionally? 5 years, seriously. I published a collection of short stories last year. She paused. Small press, nothing major. But I'm working on a novel now. What's it about? Love stories that happen when people aren't expecting them. Her directness was both refreshing and terrifying. Most people in my professional circles spoke in carefully constructed sentences designed to reveal nothing important. Paige said exactly what she meant. And you? How long have you been practicing environmental law? 23 years. Started right out of law school. Ever think about doing something else? The question surprised me. No one had ever asked what else I might want to do. Career had always been the primary focus, the thing that defined me. Not really. This work matters. But what about you? What matters to you? I looked at her across the small table, noting how the evening light caught the gold threads in her hair. When was the last time someone had asked what I wanted for myself, separate from my professional identity? I don't know, I admitted. That's honest. We sat in comfortable silence, watching other customers come and go. The coffee shop was busier tonight, filled with students and young professionals meeting friends or working on laptops. I felt simultaneously invisible and exposed, wondering if anyone could tell what was happening between us. Nicole? Yes? Are you going to pretend last night didn't happen? The question I'd been dreading. I met her eyes, seeing determination mixed with vulnerability. I'm thinking about it. Don't. Paige, I'm 52 years old. You're 33. I'm a lawyer, you're a writer. We live in completely different worlds. So what? So it's complicated. Everything interesting is complicated. She reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. Her fingers were warm, slightly calloused from typing, completely different from the manicured hands of other attorneys I knew. I'm not looking for complicated right now, I said, though I didn't pull away. What are you looking for? Another question that cut straight to the heart of things. What was I looking for? Safe conversations over predictable coffee? Another 20 years of professional success and personal isolation? I don't know that either. Then maybe that's where we start. When we left that night, she walked me to my car again. The parking lot felt charged with possibility and uncertainty. At my driver's door, I turned to face her. "This is probably a mistake," I said. "Probably. We should be smart about this." "Should we?" She stepped closer, not quite touching but close enough that I could smell her perfume, something light and floral that suited her perfectly. This time, I was the one who closed the distance. The second kiss was different from the first, less tentative, more honest about what we both wanted. Her lips parted under mine, and I felt something inside me that had been dormant for years suddenly wake up. When we separated, she rested her forehead against mine. "Tomorrow?" she whispered. "Tomorrow." But as I drove home through the snowy streets of Grand Rapids, I wondered what the hell I thought I was doing. Dating had been difficult enough in my 30s and 40s. At 52, getting involved with a younger woman felt like inviting heartbreak for both of us. Still, I knew I'd be back at that coffee shop the next evening, and probably every evening after that until one of us came to our senses. The problem was, I was starting to hope neither of us would. 2 weeks into whatever this was becoming, Paige ambushed me with an invitation that changed everything. "Have dinner with me," she said, closing her laptop with decisive finality. We were sitting in our usual corner of the coffee shop, surrounded by the familiar evening crowd of students and freelancers. I'd just finished telling her about a particularly frustrating client meeting regarding the Riverside case. "We have dinner every night," I replied, gesturing to the half-eaten sandwich between us. "Real dinner, at a restaurant, with actual plates." The suggestion hung in the air like incense, sweet and dangerous. Coffee shop meetings maintained some pretense of casualness, but restaurants implied intention. Date territory. "I'm researching a character," she added quickly. "A successful professional woman. I need to observe her in a different environment." We both knew it was a flimsy excuse, but it gave us cover for what we actually wanted. "What kind of restaurant?" "Somewhere we can talk without students eavesdropping on our conversations." That evening, I found myself in front of my bedroom mirror, changing clothes for the third time. The navy suit was too formal, the casual sweater too informal. I finally settled on black pants and a silk blouse that Marcus had once said brought out my eyes. The restaurant she'd chosen was intimate without being romantic, the kind of place where business dinners happened alongside anniversary celebrations. Paige was already seated when I arrived, wearing a dress that made her look older and somehow more serious. "You look beautiful," she said, standing to greet me. "Thank you." The compliment flustered me more than it should have. We ordered wine, something that never happened during our coffee meetings. The alcohol loosened boundaries I'd been carefully maintaining, making conversation flow in directions I hadn't intended. "Tell me about your marriage," she said, cutting directly to the subject I'd been avoiding. "That's not relevant to your character research. Humor me." I sipped the Chardonnay, considering how much truth the evening could handle. It ended badly. We wanted different things. Which were? He wanted someone who would prioritize his career over her own. I wanted partnership. How long ago? 8 years. Anyone serious since then? The question revealed how little she actually knew about my life outside our coffee shop conversations. I could have told her about the brief relationship with another attorney 3 years ago, or the handful of dates that never went anywhere. Instead, I found myself talking about loneliness in ways I'd never articulated before. "Dating becomes complicated when you're established in your career," I said. "Men my age want women who don't challenge them. Younger men want something I can't give them." "What's that?" "The fantasy of molding someone into what they want." Paige leaned forward, wine making her eyes brighter. "What if someone wanted you exactly as you are?" The question was loaded with implication. I deflected by turning the conversation toward her. "What about you? Serious relationships?" "A few. Nothing that lasted more than 2 years." "Why not?" "I fall for unavailable people." "Married people?" "Emotionally unavailable. People who've convinced themselves they don't want what they actually want." She was describing me with uncomfortable accuracy. I focused on my salmon, using eating as an excuse to avoid responding. "Tell me about your writing," I said eventually. "It's mostly about connections between people who shouldn't work together but do." "Why that theme?" Because those are the relationships that change everything. After dinner, we walked slowly toward the parking garage. The night air was crisp, snow crunching under our feet. Neither of us seemed eager to end the evening. "This was nice," I said when we reached my car. "It was." We stood facing each other in the dim light, both knowing something had shifted during dinner. The pretense of casual friendship had dissolved somewhere between the wine and the conversation about emotional availability. "Nicole." "Yes?" She moved closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gray in her blue eyes. "Stop thinking so hard." "I can't help it. It's who I am." "I know. It's one of the things I love about you." The word love hit me like cold water. Too much, too fast, too dangerous for both of us. "Paige, I think we should slow down." "Why?" "Because I'm 52 and you're 33. Because we barely know each other. Because this feels like it could get complicated very quickly." "And that scares you?" "Yes." She reached up and touched my face, thumb brushing across my cheekbone. "What if we let it be complicated?" For a moment, I almost gave in. Almost kissed her again. Almost said yes to whatever she was offering. But years of professional caution kicked in, the voice that had kept me safe by avoiding unnecessary risks. "I should go." Disappointment flashed across her features, quickly replaced by understanding. "Okay. This isn't about you." "I know." But as I drove home, I wondered if she really did know. How could I explain that the problem wasn't her age or our different careers, but the terrifying possibility that she might actually want me for exactly who I was? Success I could handle. Professional challenges were familiar territory, but being genuinely wanted by someone who saw through all my carefully constructed defenses, that was scarier than any courtroom. The next morning brought 3 missed calls from Paige and a text message that simply said, "Coffee later?" I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the keyboard. The smart thing would be to establish some distance, let whatever this was cool down before someone got hurt. Instead, I typed back, 6 o'clock. Because apparently, when it came to Paige Simmons, I was incapable of making smart choices. The next few days were torture. I'd retreat into professional mode during meetings, then catch myself staring at my phone, rereading Paige's messages. She didn't push after that awkward ending to our dinner, but her texts had a different quality now, more intimate despite their casual tone. "Working on something new. Hope your day is going well. Saw an article about environmental law that made me think of you. Coffee shop feels empty without our conversations." That last one broke my resolve. I showed up at 6:30, later than usual, hoping the delay would somehow make me seem less eager. She was there, of course, laptop closed and pushed aside like she'd been waiting. "I finished the story," she said without preamble. "The evacuation story? The one inspired by us. Want to read it?" My throat went dry. "Should I?" She slid a printed manuscript across the table. The title read, "Emergency Exit," and I could already feel my heart racing before I'd read the first line. The story was devastating in its accuracy. Not the facts, those were different enough to maintain plausible deniability, but the emotional truth. She'd captured the older woman's fear of vulnerability, her professional competence masking deep loneliness. The younger woman came across as perceptive rather than naive, someone who saw strength where others saw intimidation. The fictional women kissed in the story. More than once. "Well?" Paige's voice was carefully neutral. I looked up from the pages, meeting her blue eyes across the small table. "It's beautiful." "But," no buts, "it's genuinely beautiful writing." Relief flooded her features. "I was afraid you'd think I'd overstepped." "You wrote fiction." "Did I?" The question hung between us, loaded with everything we hadn't said directly. These fictional women felt more honest than most of our careful conversations. She'd put words to feelings I hadn't admitted to myself. "The younger woman in your story," I said slowly. "She's very sure about what she wants." "She is." "And the older woman?" Terrified, but trying not to show it. I folded the manuscript carefully, buying time to think. What happens next in the story? I haven't written the ending yet. Why not? Because I don't know how it ends. We sat quietly, the coffee shop buzz continuing around us. Students typed on laptops. Couples shared desserts, life proceeding normally while my world shifted on its axis. "Paige?" Yeah? Are we still talking about fiction? She reached across the table, fingers brushing mine. What do you think? This time, I didn't pull away. Her touch was warm, steady, real in a way that made everything else feel theoretical. I think, I said carefully, that the older woman has been alone for a long time. And she's forgotten how to be anything else. Maybe she doesn't have to remember alone. The words hung in the air between us, an invitation and a promise. I looked at our hands, hers younger and smaller but somehow steadier than mine. This could get messy, I said. Most good things do. When we left that night, we walked even more slowly than usual. The December air was sharp, snow falling in tiny flakes that caught the streetlight. At my car, I turned to face her. I'm scared, I admitted. Of what? Of wanting this too much. Of you realizing what you're getting into. Of being too old, too set in my ways, too damaged from my marriage. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see snowflakes caught in her blonde hair. Nicole? Yes? Stop talking. This time when she kissed me, I didn't hesitate. I kissed her back with 8 years of loneliness, with the desperate hope that maybe she was right about good things being messy. Her lips were soft and tasted like coffee, and when she made a small sound in the back of her throat, I pulled her closer. We broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads touching in the falling snow. This changes things, I whispered. I hope so. I don't know how to do this anymore. We'll figure it out. Her confidence was infectious. Standing there in the parking lot with snow in our hair, I almost believed that 52 wasn't too old to start over, that 13 years wasn't too big an age gap, that maybe I deserved something good. Tomorrow? She asked. Tomorrow. But as I drove home through the quiet streets, I realized tomorrow would be different. We'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Whatever happened next, there would be no more pretending this was just coffee between acquaintances. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, for the first time in years, I felt genuinely excited about something that had nothing to do with work. My phone buzzed with a text as I pulled into my driveway. Thank you for taking a chance on us. I stared at the words for a long moment before typing back. Thank you for seeing something in me, worth taking a chance on. Her response came immediately. Always. Sitting in my dark car, I realized that Paige Simmons had managed to do something no one else had in 8 years. She'd made me believe that maybe, just maybe, the best parts of my life weren't behind me. The routine physical exam was supposed to be simple. Dr. Martinez had been my physician for 12 years, and our annual appointments were usually straightforward discussions about cholesterol levels and exercise routines. At 52, I expected predictable concerns about aging, not the grave expression on her face as she reviewed my blood work. Nicole, I need to run some additional tests. What kind of tests? There are some irregularities in your results that require further investigation. The word irregularities sent ice through my veins. In my experience, medical professionals only used euphemisms when the news was bad. 3 days later, I sat in the same examination room, waiting for results that would either confirm my worst fears or give me reason to breathe normally again. Dr. Martinez entered with a folder that seemed too thin to contain life-changing information. I'm sorry, Nicole. The additional tests confirm early-stage lymphoma. The words hit me like physical blows. Early stage, lymphoma, cancer. What does that mean exactly? It means we caught it relatively early, which significantly improves your treatment options and prognosis. She continued talking about treatment protocols, survival rates, and scheduling, but I barely heard the specifics. All I could think about was Paige, and how our tentative new relationship was about to become infinitely more complicated. The good news is that this type responds well to treatment, Dr. Martinez was saying. We'll start with chemotherapy, possibly radiation depending on how you respond. How long? Treatment typically lasts 6 to 8 months. Some patients experience fatigue, nausea, and other side effects, but many are able to maintain relatively normal lives during therapy. Normal lives. As if anything about my life had been normal since meeting Paige. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The diagnosis felt surreal, like something happening to someone else. This morning I'd been a healthy middle-aged woman falling for a younger colleague. Now I was a cancer patient facing months of uncertainty. My phone buzzed with a text from Paige. Coffee tonight? I have news about the novel. I stared at the message, unable to formulate a response. How could I sit across from her in our usual corner, pretending everything was fine while this diagnosis burned in my chest like a coal? Instead of responding, I turned off my phone and spent the evening researching lymphoma online, reading statistics and treatment options, until the words blurred together. The 5-year survival rate was encouraging, but 5 years felt simultaneously like forever, and no time at all. The next morning brought 2 missed calls from Paige and increasingly concerned text messages. Is everything okay? You haven't responded. Nicole, I'm worried. Please just let me know you're alive. If I did something wrong, please tell me what it was. Each message made my chest tighten with guilt and longing. She didn't deserve to be cut off without explanation, but how could I drag her into this nightmare? She was 33, at the beginning of her career, with her whole life ahead of her. The last thing she needed was a sick older woman derailing her plans. I turned off my phone again and threw myself into work, staying at the office until midnight, reviewing depositions and case law with manic intensity. The Riverside development case required my full attention, and focusing on environmental violations was easier than thinking about abnormal cell growth. Marcus found me at my desk the next morning, wearing the same clothes from the previous day. Nicole, what the hell? Working. You look terrible. Thanks for the pep talk. He closed my office door and sat down across from my desk. What's going on? And don't tell me it's work stress. I've seen you handle bigger cases without looking like you haven't slept in days. For a moment, I considered telling him everything. Marcus had been my law partner for 15 years, the closest thing I had to family, but admitting the diagnosis out loud would make it real in ways I wasn't ready to handle. I'm fine. You're lying. I'm dealing with some personal issues. This wouldn't have anything to do with the blonde writer you've been seeing, would it? My head snapped up. How do you know about Paige? You've been different lately. Happier. And now you're miserable again, which suggests relationship problems. It's complicated. Everything good is complicated. Before I could respond, my assistant knocked on the door. Nicole? There's a Paige Simmons here to see you. She says it's personal. My heart stopped. She'd tracked me down at work, which meant she was either very determined or very worried. Probably both. Send her in, Marcus said before I could object. Marcus, no. Yes. Whatever's going on, running away won't fix it. Paige entered my office looking beautiful and concerned, her blue eyes immediately finding mine. She wore jeans and a sweater, completely out of place in the formal law office environment but somehow making everything else seem overdressed. Nicole. Her voice was soft, careful. Are you okay? I'm fine. You're not fine. You disappeared for 3 days without explanation. Marcus stood up, extending his hand to Paige. I'm Marcus Powell, Nicole's partner. And you're the writer who's been making her smile lately. Paige Simmons. She shook his hand but kept her attention focused on me. Can we talk privately? Actually, I was just leaving, Marcus said meaningfully. Nicole, take the rest of the day off. I have the Riverside deposition. I'll handle it. After he left, Paige sat in the chair he'd vacated, studying my face with uncomfortable intensity. Tell me what happened. Nothing happened. Nicole, 3 nights ago you kissed me in a parking lot like you meant it. Now you won't return my calls. Something happened. I looked at her across my desk, this beautiful, vibrant woman who deserved so much better than what I was about to put us both through. The kind thing would be to lie, to push her away before she got too invested. Instead, I heard myself saying, I have cancer. The words hung in the air between us like broken glass. Paige's face went completely still. What kind? Lymphoma, early stage. They caught it during routine blood work. She was quiet for a long moment, processing. When she spoke, her voice was steady. What's the treatment plan? Chemotherapy, possibly radiation, 6 to 8 months. Okay. Okay? She leaned forward, elbows on my desk. When do we start? The word we hit me harder than the original diagnosis. Paige, you don't understand what this means. I understand that you're scared and you're trying to push me away. I'm trying to protect you. From what? From watching someone you care about go through hell. What if I want to watch you go through hell? The question was so unexpected that I almost smiled. That's a sick thing to want. What if I want to help you get to the other side? I stared at her, this woman who'd known me for less than 2 months and was volunteering for months of hospitals and uncertainty. It was crazy. It was generous. It was exactly what I wanted and exactly what I was afraid to accept. This changes everything, I said. I know. We barely know each other. We'll learn. I might die. You might live. Her certainty was overwhelming. I felt tears threatening for the first time since hearing the diagnosis. Why? I whispered. Because you're worth it. Before I could respond, she was around the desk and pulling me out of my chair, wrapping her arms around me in the first real embrace I'd had in years. I held on tighter than I should have, breathing in her perfume and warmth, letting myself believe for just a moment that maybe I didn't have to face this alone. For 2 weeks I avoided Paige despite her daily calls and messages. The diagnosis felt like a wall between us, and every time her name appeared on my phone, I felt the weight of what I'd be putting her through. She was 33 with a bright future ahead of her, and I was 52 with months of chemotherapy appointments stretching out before me like a minefield. But Paige Simmons wasn't the type to accept defeat quietly. Nicole Rodriguez? The receptionist looked up as a familiar blonde figure swept past the desk. Someone's here to see you. Before I could protest, Paige was standing in my office doorway, arms crossed and wearing an expression I'd never seen before. Determined, bordering on furious. We need to talk. I'm with a client in 10 minutes. Then we'll make this quick. She closed the door behind her with decisive finality. What the hell do you think you're doing? Working. You're hiding. I kept my eyes focused on the legal brief in front of me, afraid that looking at her would weaken my resolve. I told you this changes everything. And I told you I didn't care. You should care. You should run as far from this mess as possible. She moved around my desk, forcing me to look at her. Up close, I could see the dark circles under her eyes, evidence that my silence had been affecting her more than her messages let on. Do you want to know what I think? Not particularly. I think you're scared. Not of the cancer, but of letting someone care about you. The accusation hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. That's not true, isn't it? When's the last time someone wanted to take care of you, instead of the other way around? I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again. She was right, and we both knew it. This isn't about me being noble, I said finally. This is about being practical. Cancer treatment is brutal. The side effects, the uncertainty, the medical bills, the constant appointments. You didn't sign up for that. What did I sign up for? Coffee dates and casual conversation. Is that really what you think this is? Her voice was quiet now, hurt replacing anger. I forced myself to meet her eyes, seeing pain there that I'd caused. Paige, be realistic. We've known each other for 2 months. Marcus told me. The statement came out of nowhere. Marcus told you what? About your marriage, about how you've been alone for 8 years, about how different you've been lately. My face burned with embarrassment and anger. He had no right. He's worried about you. He said you've been working 18-hour days since your diagnosis, avoiding everyone who cares about you. People don't need to care about me. What if they want to? Before I could respond, my office door opened and Marcus appeared, looking uncharacteristically serious. Nicole, can I see you for a minute? We're in the middle of something. Actually, Paige said, gathering her purse. I should go. But this conversation isn't over. After she left, Marcus sat down across from my desk with the same expression he used for difficult client meetings. What did you tell her? I demanded. The truth. That you're pushing away the best thing that's happened to you in years because you're terrified of being vulnerable. You had no right to discuss my personal life. Someone needs to talk sense into you before you destroy this relationship out of misguided martyrdom. It's not martyrdom, it's practical. Bullshit. Marcus leaned forward. I've watched you handle environmental disasters, corporate corruption, and impossible legal challenges without breaking a sweat. But one person wants to support you through a health crisis, and you fall apart. This is different. Because it's personal. Because she's 33 years old and doesn't know what she's getting into. Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying my face. Do you love her? The question caught me completely off guard. What? Simple question. Do you love her? I stared at him, my chest tight. We'd never used that word, Paige and I. Our relationship was too new, too undefined, but sitting there under Marcus's steady gaze, I realized the answer had been obvious for weeks. Yes. Then stop being an idiot and let her love you back. That evening, I found myself driving toward Paige's apartment building, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say, but every possible conversation seemed inadequate. She answered the door in pajamas, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Even without makeup, she was beautiful. Nicole? I'm sorry. She stepped aside, letting me into her small apartment. Books were stacked everywhere, and her laptop sat open on a desk covered with coffee cups and marked-up manuscripts. It was chaos compared to my organized life, but somehow it felt like home. I've been an idiot, I continued. Marcus was right. I've been so afraid of being a burden that I forgot to consider what you actually want. And what do I want? I don't know. That's the problem. I keep making decisions for both of us without asking what you think. She sat on her couch, patting the cushion beside her. So ask me now. I joined her, leaving space between us but close enough to see the gold flecks in her blue eyes. What do you want, Paige? I want to be there when you have chemotherapy appointments. I want to bring you soup when you feel sick. I want to hold your hair back if you need to throw up. And I want to celebrate with you when you get the all clear. Her honesty was overwhelming. What if it gets worse before it gets better? Then we'll handle worse. What if I die? What if you live? The same question she'd asked in my office, but this time I was ready to hear the answer. I'm scared, I admitted. I know. Not just of the cancer. Of this. Of caring about someone this much. She reached for my hand, fingers intertwining with mine. Want to be scared together? Instead of answering with words, I kissed her. Soft at first, then deeper as 8 years of loneliness and 2 weeks of forced separation poured out between us. When we separated, she rested her forehead against mine. No more disappearing, she whispered. No more disappearing. Promise? Promise. But even as I said the words, part of me wondered if I'd be able to keep them when treatment started and reality set in. Loving someone was terrifying enough. Loving someone while facing cancer felt like volunteering for heartbreak. Still, as Paige curled against my side on her couch, I realized that maybe heartbreak was better than the alternative of facing everything alone. Chemotherapy began on a Tuesday morning in February. Paige insisted on driving me to the first appointment, despite my protests that she didn't need to see the medical reality of what we were facing. We're doing this together, remember? She said, parallel parking outside the oncology center with more confidence than I felt. The treatment room was surprisingly comfortable, filled with recliners and warm lighting designed to make the process feel less clinical. Other patients sat quietly, some reading, others sleeping while IV bags dripped medication into their arms. First time? The nurse, a woman named Janet with kind eyes, helped me settle into a chair by the window. Yes. It's normal to be nervous. The anticipation is usually worse than the actual treatment. Paige pulled up a chair beside me, laptop balanced on her knees. I brought work to do. Hope you don't mind company. For the next 4 hours, we sat together while chemicals flowed into my bloodstream. Paige typed quietly, occasionally reading me amusing passages from whatever she was editing. The normalcy of her presence made the surreal situation bearable. How do you feel? She asked during the drive home. Tired, a little nauseous, but not as bad as I expected. Good. I made soup. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Treatment every other Tuesday, with Paige as my constant companion. She learned the nurses' names, brought them coffee, and charmed them into giving us the best chair by the window. Between appointments, we spent more time together than apart. You don't have to stay every night, I told her one evening as she unpacked groceries in my kitchen. I know. I mean it. You have your own life, your own apartment. She paused, holding a carton of eggs. Do you want me to leave? No. Then stop trying to be noble. My apartment gradually filled with signs of her presence. Books stacked on my coffee table, her favorite coffee in my kitchen, an extra toothbrush in my bathroom. She worked from my dining room table most days, claiming the light was better, though we both knew she was monitoring me for side effects. The third treatment hit harder than the previous ones. I woke the next morning feeling like I'd been hit by a truck, barely making it to the bathroom before vomiting violently. Paige appeared instantly, holding my hair and rubbing my back. "This is disgusting," I mumbled between waves of nausea. "I've seen worse." "When?" "College roommate. Epic food poisoning from bad sushi." She helped me back to bed, bringing water and crackers, settling beside me with her laptop. The matter-of-fact way she handled my weakness made it easier to accept help. "Paige? Why are you doing this?" She looked up from her screen, considering the question seriously. "Because you matter to me." "But this isn't what you signed up for when we started having coffee." "What did I sign up for?" "I don't know. Casual dating, getting to know each other, not medical appointments and vomit." She closed her laptop, giving me her full attention. "You want to know what I signed up for?" "Yes. I signed up for you, all of you. The brilliant lawyer who gets passionate about environmental justice. The woman who takes 20 minutes to choose coffee because she's afraid of making the wrong decision. The person who's so used to taking care of everyone else that she forgot how to let someone take care of her." Her honesty was overwhelming. "Even this version? Sick and weak and not particularly attractive?" "Especially this version." That night, as we lay in my bed with her arms around me, I realized something had shifted. The constant awareness of my diagnosis, the weight of uncertainty that had been pressing on my chest for weeks, had somehow become lighter. "I think I'm falling in love with you," I whispered into the darkness. "Think? No. I know I'm falling in love with you." She was quiet for so long that I wondered if she'd fallen asleep. Then she spoke, her voice soft against my hair. "I fell in love with you weeks ago. I was just waiting for you to catch up." We made love for the first time that night, slowly and carefully, her hands gentle on my body that felt foreign after weeks of medical procedures. She touched me like I was precious rather than fragile, her lips mapping paths across skin that had been poked and prodded by nurses. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "Yes. We don't have to. I want to. I need to remember what my body is for besides being sick." She showed me tenderly, patiently, her touch erasing the clinical memories of the past month. When she moved above me, blonde hair catching moonlight from the window, I felt beautiful for the first time since diagnosis. Our connection was soft and urgent simultaneously, years of loneliness dissolving in the space between heartbeats. Afterward, we lay tangled together, my head on her chest, listening to her heartbeat steady and strong. "I love you," I said, the words easier now. "I love you too. Even though I'm a mess?" "You're not a mess. You're dealing with something difficult, and you're handling it with more grace than you realize." "I don't feel graceful." "That's because you're too close to see it." The next morning brought the familiar routine of medication and careful eating. But everything felt different. The apartment that had felt like a medical ward now felt like home. Paige moved through my kitchen like she belonged there, making coffee and toast while I showered. "Treatment went well yesterday," Dr. Martinez announced at my 6-week follow-up appointment. "The tumors are responding better than expected." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by hope I'd been afraid to feel. Paige squeezed my hand, her smile brighter than the fluorescent hospital lighting. "What does that mean exactly?" I asked. "It means we're on the right track. Continue with the current protocol, and we'll reassess in another 6 weeks. Walking out of the medical center that day, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the morning of my diagnosis, genuine optimism about the future. "Celebrate?" Paige asked, bumping my shoulder. "What did you have in mind?" "Dinner. Real dinner, at a real restaurant, with real plates. Like our first date? Better than our first date." That evening, sitting across from her at a table covered with actual china, I realized that cancer hadn't ruined my life. It had simply rearranged it, clearing away everything non-essential and leaving only what mattered most. And what mattered most was currently stealing French fries off my plate while telling me about her latest chapter. "I finished the novel," she said. "The one about unexpected love stories? The one about learning that the best things happen when you stop trying to control everything." I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. "How does it end?" "Happily. With room for whatever comes next." Dr. Martinez's words from my 12-week scan still echoed in my head. Remarkable response to treatment. "We're looking at complete remission." Complete remission. The phrase felt surreal, like something that happened to other people in medical success stories, not to me. Paige had cried in the doctor's office, openly and without embarrassment, while I sat frozen in disbelief. 6 months of chemotherapy, of uncertainty, of preparing for the worst while hoping for the best, and now it was over. "We need to celebrate," she said as we walked to the car, her face still streaked with happy tears. "It doesn't feel real yet." "Then we'll make it real." She drove us straight to the bookstore, where she'd been scheduled to read from her newly published novel. The book that had started as a simple story about 2 women meeting during a fire evacuation had evolved into something deeper, exploring themes of unexpected love and finding courage in the face of uncertainty. Ladies and gentlemen, Paige Simmons, author of Emergency Exit. I sat in the front row, watching her read passages I recognized from late-night editing sessions during my treatment. Her voice was confident, animated, bringing the characters to life for an audience that hung on every word. The older woman realized that love wasn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances, Paige read. It was about finding someone worth fighting for, even when the fight seemed impossible. After the reading, during the book signing, she caught my eye and smiled. "My inspiration is here tonight," she told a curious reader. "She taught me that the best love stories happen when you least expect them." Later, at dinner, we raised glasses of wine to celebrate both my health news and her literary success. "I have something for you," she said, pulling a wrapped package from her purse. Inside was a first edition copy of her book inscribed for Nicole, who showed me that love is the only thing worth risking everything for. "Thank you for choosing us." "Paige. Read the dedication page." I flipped to the front of the book. "For NR, who taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's loving someone despite being terrified. Everyone's going to know this is about us." Good. That night, in my apartment that had become our apartment over the months of treatment, we made love with a desperation born of relief. 6 months of careful, tender intimacy gave way to something fiercer, more urgent. We were celebrating not just survival, but the future we'd almost lost before we'd had a chance to build it. "I love you," she whispered against my neck as we moved together. "I love you too. We're going to be okay. We're going to be more than okay." Afterward, lying tangled in sheets dampened with sweat and tears of joy, we talked about plans we'd been afraid to make during treatment. "I want to travel," I said. "Somewhere warm and beautiful." "Greece?" "Anywhere with you. I want to move in officially, not just gradually taking over your space, but actually combining our lives." "You mean live together?" "I mean build something together. A home, a future, whatever that looks like." The conversation was interrupted by my phone ringing. Marcus, calling to check on the test results. "How'd it go?" he asked when I answered. "Remission. Thank God." "When do you want to discuss reducing your caseload?" The question surprised me. Why would I reduce my caseload? "Because you've been talking for months about focusing on environmental activism instead of just legal practice." He was right. During treatment, when every day felt precious and uncertain, I'd often mentioned wanting to make a more direct impact on the issues I cared about. "I've been thinking about starting a nonprofit," I admitted. "Something focused on community environmental justice." "Do it." "Just like that?" "Nicole, you almost died. If that doesn't give you permission to pursue what actually matters to you, what will?" After we hung up, Paige rolled over to face me. "A nonprofit? I've been thinking about it for months. Using my legal background to help communities fight environmental abuse, but from an advocacy perspective rather than just case-by-case litigation." "That's amazing." "It would mean less money, more uncertainty. It would mean doing work that feeds your soul instead of just paying your bills." Her immediate support shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. For so many years, career discussions had been about practical considerations, salary, benefits, security. Paige's first concern was whether the work would make me happy. "What about you?" I asked. "The book is getting good reviews. Your publisher wants another one." "I already know what I want to write next." "What?" "The sequel to our story." "We don't have a sequel yet. We're living it." 6 weeks later, we were sitting across from each other at the same restaurant where we'd had our first real dinner together. But everything was different now. I wore a scarf to hide the fact that my hair was still growing back, and Paige wore a ring on her right hand that I'd given her as a promise of commitment. 1-year anniversary of our first kiss, she said, raising her glass. Was it really a year ago? December 15th. In the coffee shop parking lot. It feels like yesterday and forever ago at the same time. Do you regret any of it? The question was serious, not the light anniversary banter I'd expected. Even the cancer? Even the cancer. I considered the question honestly. The diagnosis had been terrifying, the treatment exhausting, the uncertainty excruciating. But it had also stripped away all the careful barriers I'd built around my heart, forced me to accept love I might otherwise have been too cautious to embrace. No regrets, I said. It brought us closer together faster than we might have managed otherwise. It also showed me who you really are under all that professional composure. Which is? Someone worth fighting for. Someone worth staying for. Someone worth building a life with. She reached across the table, taking my hand. I have something to ask you. Paige. I know it's unconventional, and I know we're both still figuring things out, but I don't want to waste any more time being careful. What are you saying? I want to marry you. Not next year or when everything's perfect, but soon. Because life is unpredictable and love is rare, and when you find both together, you don't let them go. The proposal was so perfectly Paige, direct and romantic and completely unexpected. I stared at her across the table, this woman who'd chosen to love me through the hardest year of my life. Are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking you to marry me. In a restaurant where anyone can hear? I'll ask you anywhere you want. I'll ask you every day until you say yes. I looked around the restaurant, at other couples sharing quiet dinners, at strangers living their ordinary Tuesday evening lives, and realized that extraordinary moments happened in the most mundane places. Yes. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. She was around the table and kissing me before I could say anything else, her joy infectious enough to make nearby diners applaud. We were making a scene, being emotional in public, doing everything my reserved nature usually avoided. I didn't care. For the first time in my carefully controlled life, I didn't care who was watching or what they thought. All that mattered was the woman in my arms and the future we were going to build together. 1 year later, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting the collar of a dress Paige had chosen for today's ceremony. December 15th had become our anniversary, and we'd decided it should also be our wedding day. You look beautiful, Paige said, appearing behind me in the reflection. She wore a simple cream-colored dress that made her blue eyes seem even brighter. I look nervous. Good nervous or bad nervous? Good nervous. The kind that means something important is about to happen. We'd kept the wedding small, just Marcus, Sarah, Dr. Martinez, and a handful of close friends gathering in the courthouse on a snowy Tuesday afternoon. Nothing fancy, nothing traditional, just two women who'd found each other during the worst and best year of their lives. Ready? Paige asked, offering her arm. Ready. The ceremony was brief, official, perfect in its simplicity. When the judge pronounced us married, we kissed to applause from our tiny audience, sealing a commitment that felt both momentous and inevitable. How does it feel to be Mrs. Rodriguez Simmons? Marcus asked at the small reception afterward. Like coming home, I said, watching Paige laugh at something Sarah had said. My nonprofit had launched successfully 6 months earlier, focusing on environmental justice in underserved communities. The work was demanding but fulfilling in ways corporate law never had been. Paige's second novel was due to her publisher in the spring, a love story about two women rebuilding their lives after trauma. Speech! Someone called out. Paige stood, raising her coffee cup since we'd foregone alcohol in favor of our original bonding beverage. A year and a half ago, I met someone in a smoky stairwell who changed everything I thought I knew about love. She looked at me, her expression soft. Nicole taught me that the best relationships aren't the easiest ones, they're the ones worth fighting for. She showed me that love isn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It's about choosing each other every single day, especially when things get difficult. The small group raised their cups, but Paige wasn't finished. To my wife, who's braver than she knows, stronger than she believes, and more loved than she'll ever fully understand. Later that evening, alone in our apartment, we sat on the couch where we'd had our first honest conversation about feelings and futures. The Christmas tree we'd decorated together glowed softly in the corner, presents wrapped and waiting underneath. No regrets? Paige asked, curled against my side. About marrying you? Never. About any of it? The cancer, the age difference, moving so fast? I considered the question seriously. 18 months ago, I'd been a lonely workaholic, convinced that the best parts of my life were behind me. Now I was married to an incredible woman, doing work that mattered, facing a future full of possibility instead of just obligation. The cancer sucked, I said finally, but it gave us something we might not have found otherwise. Which was permission to be vulnerable with each other, to stop pretending we didn't need anyone. I never pretended that. No, but I did, for years. She shifted to look at me directly. And now? Now I know that needing someone isn't weakness, it's just love. Snow continued falling outside our window, the same weather that had marked our first meeting. But everything else had changed. We'd built something together that neither of us had expected to find. A partnership that had survived medical crises, professional transitions, and the general chaos of two independent women learning to share their lives. I have something for you, Paige said, reaching for a wrapped package beside the couch. We said no presents until Christmas. This isn't a Christmas present, it's a wedding present. Inside was a leather-bound journal, the cover embossed with our wedding date. For what? Our story. The real one, not the fiction version. I thought we could write it together, document all the ordinary moments that make up an extraordinary love story. I opened to the first page, where she'd already written, Nicole and Paige, Year 1, in which two women met during a fire alarm and decided to build something that would last forever. What should we write first? Today. How it felt to marry your best friend. We spent the next hour writing alternating entries, documenting our wedding day from both perspectives, creating the first chapter of what we hoped would be a very long story. Your turn, I said, passing her the journal. She wrote for several minutes, then handed it back. December 15th, evening entry by Paige. Today I married the smartest, kindest, most stubborn woman I've ever met. She spent the entire ceremony trying not to cry, then sobbed through our first dance to no music in our living room. I love her more every day, which I didn't think was mathematically possible, but apparently love doesn't follow rational rules. I did not sob. You sobbed. I got emotional. You sobbed, and it was beautiful. As we prepared for bed in our shared space, going through routines that had become automatic over months of living together, I marveled at how natural it all felt. Marriage hadn't changed anything fundamental between us, but it had added a weight of official commitment that felt both comforting and thrilling. Mrs. Rodriguez-Simmons? Paige called from the bathroom. Yes, Mrs. Rodriguez-Simmons. I love you. I love you too. Lying in bed afterward, Paige's arm around my waist and her breathing evening out into sleep, I thought about the conversation we'd had months earlier about writing sequels to our story. She'd been right. We were living the sequel, and it was better than anything either of us could have imagined on that first night in the coffee shop. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Congratulations again. You two give the rest of us hope that good things happen to people who deserve them. I typed back, good things happen to people who are brave enough to accept them. Outside, snow continued falling on Grand Rapids, covering the city where we'd found each other and decided to build a life together. Tomorrow would bring work and challenges and all the ordinary complications of marriage, but tonight was perfect in its simplicity. Two women who'd met during an emergency evacuation, who'd navigated cancer and career changes and the vulnerable work of learning to love someone completely, were finally exactly where they belonged. Together.